All right, so if you thought that the issuance of the Mueller report over a month ago was going to spell the end of Trump-Russia frenzy, boy, were you wrong. And I could have actually told you were wrong at the time, and I said this during that period, that by no means was this actually going to meaningfully tamp down the hysteria around Trump-Russia. Rather, it's just going to take a different form. It's going to slightly mutate. We're going to enter a new phase. But it's all going to stem back to what is the essential underlying issue around Trump-Russia, which is the conspiracy collusion. And that's notwithstanding the focus on obstruction, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I say this because there was a really significant indication that impeachment is going full steam ahead in the House of Representatives, and that was indicated by the fact that the content of a meeting among House Democratic leadership got leaked almost immediately to the Washington Post and perhaps other outlets. And these meetings are supposed to be off the record. And it's not like it's a caucus-wide meeting where anybody, any backbencher could leak something. This is a relatively small group of people. And it shows that there's such serious pushback to Nancy Pelosi, who's been reluctant somewhat to move forward on impeachment, although she's made gestures about potentially being in favor of it. She's at least been one of the least hawkish, so to say, on impeachment in the caucus. And for somebody in her leadership team to immediately run to the press and leak this private meeting, I mean, that shows the gravity with which they view these discussions. And one potential leaker, I'm not saying I know this is for sure her by any stretch, but shortly after this meeting, Mary Gay Scanlon, who's a Democrat from Pennsylvania, she put out a long statement demanding that impeachment proceedings be initiated, and that's especially significant because she's the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, and the Judiciary Committee is the committee in which impeachment proceedings would be managed. So there's a lot of pressure coming within the Judiciary Committee, who have been at the at ground zero of all these subpoena battles, and they issued the contempt citation of Bill Barr 2 weeks ago, which, by the way, still hasn't been brought to the full House for a vote. So they issued a contempt citation of Barr, which means nothing unless on a practical level, unless the full House votes on it, which they have not. And the reason for that, I think, is plausibly because they understand that the rationale behind that contempt citation was fallacious, because what they were demanding Bill Barr to do would have been unlawful for Bill Barr to do. So they were basically demanding that he commit a violation of the law. Because remember, they wanted the full unredacted Mueller report, and Barr is prohibited by federal statutes from revealing information that is subject to that was derived from a grand jury. So the Democrats' complaint on that subpoena never really made much sense. It all seemed like it was just a machination to get into this hostile posture vis-a-vis the executive branch. But you have, so Mary Gay Scanlon explicitly endorsed initiating impeachment proceedings today. David Cicilline, Democrat from Rhode Island, announced yesterday that he favors initiating impeachment proceedings, and he's also on the Judiciary Committee. He's a subcommittee chairman, which means he's a relatively influential player in that body. Steve Cohen of Tennessee endorsed impeachment. Joe Neguse, who is a freshman Democrat from Colorado, now advocates initiating impeachment proceedings, and you have other, and he's also on the Judiciary Committee. So, and you have other significant members of the caucus now, only in the past 24 hours, coming out in favor of initiating impeachment proceedings. Mark Pocan, who is the chairman of the Progressive Caucus, endorsed doing this. John Yarmuth, Mark Pocan is from Wisconsin. John Yarmuth is the Budget Committee chairman. He now is backing impeachment. Pramila Jayapal, also of the Progressive Caucus, is for impeachment now explicitly. I mean, a lot of these people had kind of indicated that they were moving in the direction of impeachment, but they kind of needed a precipitating event to actually fully endorse it. And the refusal of Don McGahn to appear at a scheduled hearing today by 10 a.m. was that precipitating cause. Trump had ordered him not to appear, and invoked executive privilege. So John Yarmuth is from Kentucky. And then, there's still some dissension within the Democratic leadership. Apparently Hakeem Jeffries, who obviously is very ambitious and would love to be speaker someday, he's kind of out there defending Pelosi pretty aggressively and kind of being somewhat dismissive of the people within the leadership who are now demanding impeachment. But, for example, Diana DeGette, Democrat from Colorado, she came out for impeachment. And when I say for impeachment, I mean they're coming out for initiating impeachment proceedings, and they're not saying one way or another which way they'll vote on an ultimate articles of impeachment, result. That's still down the line. The operative issue now is whether the impeachment proceedings are going to be initiated, because that gives the House sort of additional investigative leverage to do whatever it is that they want to do. So Diana DeGette endorsing it is significant because she's the chief deputy whip in the House Democratic Caucus. These people's titles might not mean much to you, but they actually signify that they have pretty well-established power within the Democratic Caucus. And so for people within that leadership power structure to be now endorsing impeachment means a lot more than your kind of freshman representative like Rashida Tlaib, AOC, Ayanna Pressley, those types endorsing impeachment, which they had a long time ago. These people endorsing it now is a much greater indication that there's actually going to be tangible action taken in furtherance of impeachment. So why do I say that this is just a continuation of the collusion melodrama? Well, what you'll often hear online and from some Democrats is that they posit that there's an easy differentiation to be made between the conspiracy element of the Mueller report, Volume 1, and the obstruction element, Volume 2. So they've been fixating more on obstruction generally since the Mueller report was issued, which is a little ironic because it's not as if for 2+ years everybody's been freaking out day after day about obstruction. The whole reason they were freaking out is because there was always some bombshell story about how this or that data point was explosive evidence of collusion or of a conspiracy, whatever term you'd like to use. That range of theories was what drove so much outsized and blinkered attention to this issue for so long. And yet now they kind of want to pivot and pretend as though obstruction was always what mattered to them all along, and that just doesn't fly. So while, yes, in a technical sense, in a legalistic sense, you can separate obstruction and collusion, they're not ever going to be politically separable. And what do I mean by that exactly? Well, I mean, hypothetically, you could charge Trump with an obstruction crime, right? A prosecutor could theoretically indict Trump on some obstruction-related offense, and that doesn't mean that Trump is guilty of any collusion offense, right? So legally, yeah, that's true. But impeachment is a political proceeding. It's legal and political. It's kind of a strange constitutional fusion of the two notions. You hear the cliche repeated over and over again, impeachment is a political decision. That's true. So the reason why obstruction and collusion are inseparable is because if you're dealing with a political proceeding, then the way that collusion provided the framework for everything that people are viewing now as obstruction, that inevitably is going to be a factor in the wider considerations of whether it's viable to impeach Trump on collusion-related offenses. There was only ever an investigation in the first place. There was only ever an FBI investigation, a special counsel investigation, because of this collusion hypothesis. So if Trump obstructed something that had to do with the collusion investigation, of course, the broader notion of collusion is going to have to play a role in the deliberations over obstruction. Because you hear Democrats saying, this is so important and it's, the future of the American Republic is dependent on us doing this. Because not only did Trump obstruct, he obstructed an investigation that was of such massive magnitude because it had to do with an attack on our democracy by a hostile foreign power, and whether any Trump officials participated or colluded with the perpetrators of that attack. And some Democrats have even been explicit in saying that they're not totally forsaking collusion as an impetus to impeach Trump. Elizabeth Warren, in the rationale that she provides as to why she backs impeachment, she was the first major Democratic presidential candidate to do so. She brings up this whole notion that of collusion-related offenses. Now, I don't think that's the primary driver of why she's backing it, but she incorporates that into her overall argument, for sure. I mean, do people really think that if there is this intensive hearing, a series of hearings on impeachment, if the House actually initiates this, and it comes to dominate media discussion every single day, drowning almost everything else out? I mean, I think Nancy Pelosi is right when she says, as a warning to her colleagues, that if we go down this road, it's going to suck up all the energy around every other issue that's part of our legislative agenda. Obviously, that's going to be the case. I mean, it's going to be every single day utter saturation around what's the latest news with impeachment. That's just unavoidable. And I think everybody who's been following the media over the course of Trump-Russia knows that's true. So do people really think if this is actually initiated, everybody is just going to very legalistically and technically and rationally say, oh, yes, we're dealing exclusively with obstruction. There's no collusion stuff related here. They're not going to invoke the specter of Russia. They're not going to invoke, Roger Stone and all these other, characters who played a role in the Mueller investigation because of the potential that they committed collusion, which we now know they did not. We should have always known that because it was a ridiculous concept all along. But I just don't buy for one single second that most politicians or most of the media or anybody is going to have an appetite to sit there and, very rationally parse out these issues. No, it's all going to be under this one cluster of Mueller-related stuff. And Mueller only exists as a special counsel and as this, dominant figure in American political life because of his involvement in the collusion aspect of the investigation. So, yeah, by going down this road, Democrats ensure that collusion is not going away. A week or two ago, Pelosi and Schumer put out a letter where they said that there were still unanswered questions around the extent to which Trump coordinated with Russia. So they're basically saying we don't accept collusion as being a resolved issue. So obviously it's going to continue. Please bet me money if you don't think it's going to continue, because I'll win a lot. Now people ask me, aren't you defending Trump if you don't think he should be impeached? Aren't you excusing his abuses of power? No. I mean, if you don't support impeachment, it doesn't mean that you are necessarily excusing anything Trump has done. You may simply think that there are other rational means by which to counteract Trump's destructive tendencies that don't involve perpetuating a debunked militaristic conspiracy theory that was generated by the CIA and FBI. I like how it's seen as strange and bizarre to not want to continue pushing that theory, which has caused so much damage. Like, you're the one defending Trump, even though they gave him a gift when he got to declare no collusion, no obstruction. I was right all along about the witch hunt, and a lot of his criticisms were actually correct. So now he's going to be even more correct as the, quote, witch hunt continues on flimsier grounds than ever. He's going to have a legitimate victim narrative, which is like Trump's sweet spot. He loves to cast himself as a victim. He's almost a crybaby. But on the other hand, a lot of times he is right that there are bizarre standards applied to him that don't have any real basis in the substance. I'm all for criticizing Trump on lots of stuff. I do it virtually every day. But just because I don't get on board with like the popular, left liberal critique at times, because I don't think it's merited, doesn't mean I'm excusing Trump for anything. I mean, that's just so stupid. One thing I hear from Trump supporters is that, oh yeah, we want Democrats to impeach Trump because that means Trump will get more popular and Democrats will lose in 2020. I don't know that that's a foregone conclusion by any stretch. I mean, I don't know. I mean, nobody actually knows what will come of this. It's an unprecedented situation, and not unprecedented in the sense that there's never been any impeachment proceedings before in U.S. history. Bill Clinton was impeached. Andrew Johnson was impeached. But that's only two presidents since the 1700s. So people who are acting like we have this like well-established sample size or something to determine how the public is going to react to this or what the electoral ramifications are going to be are just kidding themselves. Yes, I think it's a certainty that segments of Trump's, quote, base, and that's a word I think is overused, but, the core segment of Trump support are going to be energized and inflamed by impeachment proceedings being initiated, but at the same time, a certain segment of Democrats are going to be inflamed and energized by it as well. So maybe they'll balance out. Who knows? I don't know. And either way, Trump, in order to win re-election, needs to go beyond the base. He can't just get 30% of the vote or 25% of the vote or however you quantify what the base constitutes. And who knows, people who are like soft Trump supporters or Trump curious or like possibly will vote for Trump but might not, maybe they'll just get fatigued by all the Trump-related drama, which continues nonstop in part of his doing and in part of the doing of others. But nonetheless, it's a constant feature of daily American political life now. And maybe they just say to themselves, you know what? I don't necessarily blame Trump for all of it, but I'm just sick of the nonstop frenzy, and we need to get somebody else in there. That seems plausible to me. I mean, Trump won in 2016 because he got like rural voters who had voted for Obama to vote for him. I mean, those people aren't like Hannity watching partisans who are following every little development in this story religiously. They have other stuff going on in their lives generally. So I think when these Trump people say so smugly that they know how it's going to turn out and it's going to help Trump. I mean, maybe or maybe not. I don't know. I think there's, actually valid arguments on both sides. I can't say for sure because it's a unique set of circumstances now. I mean, Bill Clinton, yes, he got a little more popular after he was impeached, but he was only impeached after he got reelected. So he didn't have to worry about another election. I mean, the issues on which he was impeached were a lot different. I mean, it really, I mean, he committed, he perjured himself, but he perjured himself having to do with an extramarital affair, essentially. I'm oversimplifying. I know the history of the Clinton impeachment, to explain it to me. But I'm saying the set of circumstances then differ now because now you have this espionage drama with a foreign adversary and collusion and WikiLeaks and emails and all that. So it's just different, and we don't know how people are going to interpret it. Especially if there's, let's say Mueller testifies and he says something which could open a door to a further line of inquiry. I mean, we don't know. Again, I'm very scornful of the collusion notion overall, but I don't think that my perception is necessarily reflected by the entire electorate. I mean, that would be myopic. So anybody who authoritatively tries to lecture you on how this is all going to pan out, how it's all going to play politically or electorally, they're just blowing hot air. So we shall see what happens, and I will talk to you all later.